Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. And we've got the AP Top 25 poll out now after a crazy weekend in college football. That does lead to some shakeups in the top 3, the top 5, and a ton of them in the top 10. So there's a lot to break down in this video. Let's go ahead and jump into it now. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content like this. And let's get into it here now. Others receiving votes. I do want to shout out to Troy with 80 votes, NC State with 62, and Cincinnati, actually, with their most recent loss, fall out of the top 25. This is the first time in about, I believe, 18 or 19 weeks at least of college football that they've not been in the top 25. In fact, it probably is longer than that. I think it could be anywhere upwards of 23 to 25 weeks even. So it's crazy to see them outside of it. And I actually want to mention about Cincinnati right now. Luke Fickell is considered to be a candidate for Wisconsin's head coaching job. The Big Ten right now, they're making some splashy moves. Nebraska went out and hired Matt Rule after he was fired from the Carolina Panthers this week. Obviously, this week is when they hired him, not when he was fired. And then Cincinnati now looks like they are in the ring for Luke Fickell. So there's a lot of moving pieces in college football right now. Let's get into it now. Mississippi State jumps up to 25 after their win over Ole Miss, who you see is no longer ranked as well. Only 22 votes for them to be into the top 25. So clearly not enough for them to get in there. Mississippi State, though, at 99 votes, a pretty comfortable spot for them. In the SEC, 8-4. They haven't had the season they've been hoping for, but it's not terrible either. I think that the bottom of the top 25 right now is a little weak, which I think is indicated here with 24. UNC here now, they dropped 6 spots after losing to NC State. And some people are going to say, whoa, it's kind of weird that NC State's not ranked. North Carolina is. You look at the overall record, the overall resume. It does make some sense, but at the same time, the Tar Heels, a narrow loss over their in-state rival there. You would think maybe they would have dropped lower. UTSA wins by 3 points against UTEP. Definitely impressive how well they played this year, 10-2. They also made a run into the top 25 last year. The Roadrunners have had another nice season, so a lot of credit to that program and kind of where they're at right now. UCF, their most recent game was a 7-point win over South Florida. You would think that they would win that game by a little bit more. They do move up 3 spots here, but that's because they got some help from teams like Ole Miss, Cincinnati, and North Carolina all losing. So I don't think it was themselves propelling themselves. I think it was more so other teams losing. Therefore, UCF moves up. I think very similar thing with Texas here. Their most recent win was an 11-point win over Baylor. They also move up 3 spots for somewhat of the same reason. I do think Texas has a pretty good future ahead of themselves. Obviously, they've had a couple tough losses this year, one really, really bad loss as well, where the offense couldn't get things moving. But for the most part, they've been good. South Carolina, the Gamecocks here now, they're one of the most important teams to talk about. You see, last week, they were not ranked. And here, they're up to number 20. They've had 3 wins against top 25 ranked teams this year and 2 in a row against top 10 ranked teams, which has been very impressive. They knocked Clemson off the pedestal and really kind of solidified things for who the top 5 are right now in college football. Had Clemson won that game, I think there'd be more discussion about that. But since Clemson goes down, Spencer Rattler's been smoking that top 10 pack, and they get a win here. The Gamecocks definitely moving in the right direction, and Spencer Rattler's looked really good the last couple of weeks as well. Notre Dame, they fall to 8-4 after their loss to USC, 11-point loss, and Notre Dame, they've been up and down this year. You know, at certain points, people thought, hey, this could be a top 5, top 10 program in the nation right now. And then at certain points, they've been unranked. They've been as low as, see right here, number 19. There's a lot to be questioned right now about Notre Dame. Obviously, losing Brian Kelly was tough for that program. And I think it has hurt them on Saturdays when it comes to their game day performance. Seeing 4 losses for the Fighting Irish is something pretty shocking. Yes, they've had somewhat of a tough schedule this year. They've played some really good top-end teams, but still 19th right now, not really loving the direction of where they're at currently. Tulane, though, you see them, their most recent win was over Cincinnati by 3. They move up 1 spot here to number 18. They're the big surprise here in the top 25. I would say one of the teams that a lot of people I don't think had marked as a top 25 team coming into the year. They've played that way, though. You see their 10-2 record definitely stands out when you look at that, especially compared to some of the others they're around right here. A lot of 8-4 teams, 9-3 teams. Some of these smaller conferences like UTSA with Conference USA and then Tulane in the American Athletic Conference. Some of these teams, you have to have a 10-2 or better record to even make the list here, and that's why they do with that very good record. They've been going out and winning a lot of games. Now we move up from 17 to 11. This is an interesting category here. UCLA, the Pac-12 is loaded in this section of the video. UCLA at 17, another Pac-12 school. Oregon State, who knocked off Oregon. Very interesting to see the voters still give an edge to Oregon here. Both teams have a 9-3 record. Oregon earlier in the year got blown out. I mean, completely devastated by Georgia, and now a 4-point loss to Oregon State. It's interesting to note that they still do have about 40 votes more than Oregon State in terms of total points for where they should be ranked, which is kind of surprising to me because Oregon State just outplayed them and beat them. And of course, one of the Oregon players even punched a fan in that game. Clearly shows how demoralizing that loss was for the Ducks there. And it was definitely disappointing when Oregon State gets the better of them, though, but finds themselves still 1 seed back from Oregon in the AP Top 25. Florida State here, this program is starting to come back to form. They're still working their way there, 9-3, not nearly where they were. You think back 10 years ago with how good that program was at the time, seemingly producing a ton of Heisman winners. You think back to guys like Jameis Winston. They had a lot of talent coming through that program in the mid-2010s. At this point, they're not quite there yet, but they're working their way back in the ACC. K-State here, 20-point win over Kansas in their most recent one in that Big 12. They're 9-3. They've been having a really nice season. We've seen them kind of as a staple here in the top 20 in the last 4 or 5 weeks or so. Utah, another Pac-12 school. Their most recent win was a 42-point win over Colorado. We see 4 Pac-12 teams here from 17 to 11. So a lot of Pac-12 schools in here. The conference is looking better this year for sure. Think back to last year, it was a really down year for that conference. They do look a lot better this year. There's been a lot of talent in Utah, UCLA, Oregon State, Oregon are all examples of teams that I think are still back to building and getting to where they really want to be, which is all top 10 schools. LSU here in the SEC, they lost to Texas A&M rather handedly, and you might say, wow, does LSU really even deserve to be ranked 11th right now? And for me, I don't think so. I do think this is a case of some of that SEC bias a little bit. They've had some good wins this year. Obviously, some really monster wins. Even the one over Alabama, you look at that as one of the staple wins for them. But at the same time, they've had some bad losses. Losing to A&M here, not a good look for that program. They've had some questionable games out there where we talked about Brian Kelly and the loss from Notre Dame. It's still taking a little bit of time in LSU for him to really become what I think he's going to turn that program into. Jaden Daniels looks like a really nice college quarterback for them, nice dual threat. But this year, a little up and a little down. And I think because of that, some of the high moments have really propelled them into looking like a top 10 team at times. But some of those low moments, I think, should move them lower than number 11, in my opinion. Now we get into that top 10. And there we see Clemson moving down 3 spots only after the loss to South Carolina, a team that was unranked coming into the week. Interesting to see them stay in the top 10, but with some of the movement, it does make sense. Because of that, Washington with their 18-point win moves up to number 9. They move up 3 spots with some of the teams above them falling, like Clemson, like an LSU. Then we see Penn State. They were ranked 11th last week. 19-point win over Michigan State. The Spartans just have not been that good this year. The Nittany Lions take advantage of that. 10-2. That's kind of the key record here to be a top 10 team right now. You see them move up to number 8. Tennessee at number 7. They're 10-2 as well. They really took care of business against Vanderbilt, even on the road, 56-0. That game was a blowout from the start. And the Volunteers really, really took care of business, even without Hendon Hooker. They still have a lot of really good talent on that team. Jalen Hyde, I think, is really the guy who flashes the most often. But they've got a really loaded roster right now. And if things bounce right for them down the stretch here, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that they could make an appearance into the college football playoffs. But I do think it's kind of hard for them to get there, especially with Alabama here as well. If Alabama were to win out and you get a little bit of help from some of the teams above you, I'm not ruling Alabama out from the college football playoffs yet at this point. I still think it's open. It's just going to be really, really difficult. You see Ohio State here. They're the team that really everyone wants to talk about. So let's get into it here. 5-1. Ohio State loses to Michigan. Now, CJ Stroud had some really nice throws in that game. You think about the one deep ball on the sideline to Marvin Harrison Jr. That was one of the more incredible throws we saw this past weekend, threw with anticipation and was a really nice pass. But the second half kind of fell apart for this Ohio State Buckeyes team. They end up losing by 22 to Michigan. They could not stop the run in this game. And a lot of people are calling for Ryan Day's head right now. I think that's a little egregious. He is 11-1. He's been in this top 5 rather consistently in his tenure at Ohio State. I don't think that you should go out and say, fire this guy just because of one loss this year. But it was a really important loss, which is why we see the top 4 that we currently do. USC there. Caleb Williams, Lincoln Riley, their first year in the program, they've been there for 10 months. And they're in position right now that if things go their way, if they win out, they would likely be represented in the college football playoffs. Last week was the first time in 5 years that USC was in the top 5 in an AP top 25 poll. This week, they jump up one more spot because of Ohio State's loss, and they feel really good about themselves right now. That 11-point win over Notre Dame, tough game, right? You have to go in and you have to win that one, especially with what happened between Ohio State and Michigan being scheduled for that week. You need to win that game. They did. They moved to 11-1. Then we see the top 3 schools, and TCU, they've been such a great program this year. They've been, really awesome. It's such a great story. Think about where they were 15, 16 months ago. The whole program was reshaping. They fired their head coach. You think, where's this program headed? Well, they're headed to the top 3. And they're a team that we're going to probably see in the college football playoffs this year. 48-point win over Iowa State. Impressive for them for sure. Moving up one spot because of Ohio State's loss definitely does help them as well here. Michigan claims the number 2 spot after beating Ohio State. And it's interesting. We only see first place votes for 2 teams this week. Ohio State, the one person who'd been voting for them consistently, no longer is voting for them first. But Michigan now has 5 votes for first place after their 22-point win over previously ranked number 2 Ohio State. And then Georgia, 58 first place votes. They win big over Georgia Tech in state there. That's a game you expect Georgia to win. They have. And I think that's been really the MO for them this year. They win the games they're supposed to. If college football were to end today, the teams that would be in the college football playoffs, Georgia, Michigan, TCU, USC. Conference championships are going to be really important for this. If somehow, we see a couple of these teams slide like USC in the Pac-12, shout out to that conference as well. We've seen a lot of good performance from them. Let's say Oregon or Oregon State or UCLA or some school gets hot here at the end and knocks off USC. It opens the door back up for one of these teams here in 5 to 7, whether that's Ohio State, Alabama, Tennessee. If Alabama goes and wins the SEC championship, it's hard to say that they don't make it, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at here. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.